Canine dog bites. Stranger at bus stop. What fell from his bag? Sparked a citywide investigation. What happened next will shock you to your core. Listen to the story you're about to hear and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The morning started like any other Tuesday in the quiet suburb of Riverside. Officer Emma Carter adjusted her radio as she walked alongside her K9 partner, Max, a sleek Belgian Malinois whose reputation for precision was unmatched in the police force. The bus stop on Maple Street buzzed with the usual crowd of commuters clutching coffee cups and checking phones, waiting for the 7:45 a.m. route to downtown. Max had been Emma's partner for 3 years. In all that time, he had never made a mistake, never attacked without command, never shown aggression toward an innocent person. His training was flawless, his instincts sharper than any human officer Emma had ever worked with. That's why what happened next would change everything. A man in his mid-40s stood apart from the crowd. Clean-shaven, wearing a simple gray jacket and dark jeans, he clutched an old duffel bag against his chest. Nothing about him seemed threatening, nothing that would catch a trained officer's eye. He looked tired, maybe from a long night shift, and kept glancing at his watch like he was running late for something important. Emma barely noticed him. She was focused on a routine patrol, making sure the morning commute stayed peaceful. Max trotted beside her, calm and controlled, his ears alert but relaxed. The autumn air was crisp, and golden leaves danced across the sidewalk as a gentle breeze swept through the neighborhood. Then everything changed in a heartbeat. Without warning, without any visible trigger, Max suddenly lunged forward. His powerful body coiled like a spring before exploding into motion. Emma's heart stopped as she watched her perfectly trained partner launch himself at the stranger with the duffel bag. "Max, no!" Emma shouted, but it was too late. The dog's teeth found the man's arm, and both of them crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fabric. The duffel bag flew from the stranger's grip, skidding across the concrete as bystanders screamed and scattered. Emma's training kicked in as she rushed forward to control the situation, her mind racing with confusion and horror. Max had never done anything like this. Ever. "Get him off me!" the stranger screamed, his voice high with panic and pain. "What's wrong with your dog?" Emma grabbed Max's collar and commanded him to release. The dog obeyed instantly, but something was wrong. Instead of backing away apologetically like he usually did when corrected, Max remained tense. His hackles were raised, his lips pulled back in a low growl, and his eyes never left the stranger's face. It was as if every instinct in his body was telling him this man was dangerous. "I'm so sorry," Emma said, helping the man to his feet. Blood seeped through his torn jacket sleeve, and she could see the puncture wounds from Max's teeth. "He's never done anything like this before. Are you hurt badly?" The stranger winced as he examined his arm. "I think I need medical attention," he said, his voice shaky. "Why did he attack me? I wasn't doing anything wrong." Emma's stomach twisted with guilt and confusion. This was a disaster. Internal affairs would investigate. Max might be put down. Her career could be over. But as she looked at her partner, still standing rigid with his eyes locked on the stranger, she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was happening here. That's when she noticed what had fallen from the man's bag. Among the scattered contents, a water bottle, some loose change, a crumpled bus schedule, lay something that made Emma's blood run cold. A small, worn stuffed rabbit with faded pink fur and one missing button eye. The kind of toy a child would carry everywhere, love until it fell apart, refuse to sleep without. But this wasn't just any toy. Emma's breath caught in her throat as recognition hit her like a physical blow. She had seen this exact rabbit before, clutched in the arms of a crying mother on the evening news just 2 weeks ago. It was custom-made, one of a kind, with a distinctive purple bow around its neck that had been hand-sewn by a grandmother who lived 3 states away. This was Lily Mason's rabbit, the 5-year-old girl who had vanished from her front yard 14 days ago, leaving behind nothing but her shoes and this beloved stuffed animal that her mother said she never went anywhere without. "Where did you get this?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she picked up the rabbit with trembling hands. The stranger's face went pale. "Get what? I don't know what you're talking about." "This rabbit," Emma said, holding it up. "Where did you find it?" I picked it up from a bench somewhere," he stammered. "People leave stuff behind all the time. I was going to throw it away." But Emma wasn't buying it. Max was still growling, still focused entirely on this man, like he could smell something terrible that humans couldn't detect. And this rabbit, this exact, one-of-a-kind rabbit that belonged to a missing child, couldn't be a coincidence. The stranger tried to step back, but Emma moved to block his path. "Sir, I need you to stay right here. I'm calling for backup." "This is ridiculous," the man said, but his voice cracked with nervousness. "Your dog attacked me for no reason, and now you're treating me like a criminal because I picked up some old toy from a park bench." Emma's radio crackled to life as she called for additional units. Around them, curious bystanders kept their distance, phones out, recording everything. The morning commute had turned into something far more serious than anyone could have imagined. Max pressed closer to Emma's side, never taking his eyes off the stranger. The dog's behavior was unlike anything she had ever seen from him. His whole body vibrated with tension as if he was barely containing himself from attacking again. Emma had worked with canines long enough to know that dogs like Max didn't make mistakes. Their noses could detect things human senses never could: fear, guilt, the lingering scent of other people. What was Max smelling on this man? "Look, I don't want any trouble," the stranger said, backing toward the street. "I'll just take my things and go." "No," Emma said firmly. "You're not going anywhere until we figure out what's going on here." She looked down at the stuffed rabbit in her hands. The purple bow was slightly frayed, and the pink fur was matted in places from being handled by small fingers. But there was something else, a faint smell that made her stomach turn. It was subtle, almost masked by the scent of old fabric and dust, but unmistakable once she noticed it. Fear. The smell of a terrified child. The first police backup arrived within minutes, followed by an ambulance for the stranger's bite wounds. As the paramedics cleaned and bandaged his arm, Emma pulled her sergeant aside. "This isn't random," she said, showing him the rabbit. "This belonged to Lily Mason, the girl who went missing 2 weeks ago." Sergeant Williams frowned as he examined the toy. "Are you sure?" "Positive. It was all over the news. The mother said it was custom made by the kid's grandmother. Look at this purple bow. It's exactly the same." Williams glanced at the stranger, who was now sitting in the back of an ambulance, looking increasingly nervous as more police arrived. "What's your dog's take on all this?" Emma looked at Max, who was still alert and focused on the man despite being 20 feet away. "He's never wrong about people, never. In 3 years, he's never attacked without cause." The sergeant nodded slowly. "Then we treat this as more than just a dog bite incident. I'll call Detective Morrison and have him run the man's ID. We'll also need to contact the family and confirm this is really their daughter's toy." But even as the wheels of investigation began turning, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were only seeing the tip of something much darker. The way Max had reacted, the stranger's nervousness, the impossible coincidence of him carrying a missing child's most precious possession. It all pointed to something that made her sick to think about. As she watched the paramedics finish treating the man's wounds, Emma made a silent promise to Lily Mason's family. If this stranger knew something about what happened to their little girl, she would find out. No matter what it cost her career, no matter what internal affairs said about Max's attack, she would get to the truth. Because sometimes, the most important clues come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, a dog knows things that humans miss entirely. The stranger was placed in the back of a patrol car, still protesting his innocence, still claiming he had just found the rabbit on a bench. But Emma noticed something else as they prepared to take him in for questioning. He kept looking back at Max with genuine fear in his eyes. Not the kind of fear someone has after being bitten by a dog, but something deeper, something that suggested this was far from over. Emma's hands trembled as she held the stuffed rabbit, memories of the news coverage flooding back like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She remembered Mrs. Mason's broken voice as she spoke to reporters, describing how Lily never went anywhere without her precious bunny. The toy had been found in their front yard, dropped during what police believed was an abduction, but now it was here, in this stranger's bag, smelling of fear and secrets. Detective Sarah Morrison arrived within the hour, her sharp eyes taking in the scene with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen too much darkness in her 15-year career. She was known throughout the department for her ability to crack the hardest cases, to see connections others missed, and to never give up on a missing child. "Tell me everything," Morrison said, pulling Emma aside as the forensics team began collecting evidence from the scattered contents of the stranger's bag. Emma explained the morning's events, from Max's unprecedented attack to the discovery of Lily's rabbit. Morrison listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "Has Max ever shown false positives?" Morrison asked. "Never," Emma replied firmly. "In 3 years, he's been right every single time. When he alerts on drugs, we find them. When he tracks a suspect, we catch them. When he detects explosives, they're there. He doesn't make mistakes." Morrison nodded, her eyes drifting to Max, who remained focused on the patrol car containing the stranger. "Then, we trust his instincts. What's the suspect's name?" "David Torres," Emma read from her notepad. 43 years old, lives in an apartment complex about 6 miles from here. Works night shifts at a warehouse downtown. Clean record, no prior arrests. "Too clean," Morrison muttered. "Let's see what he has to say about this rabbit." At the police station, David Torres sat in interview room 2, his bandaged arm resting on the metal table. He had refused a lawyer, insisting he had done nothing wrong and just wanted to clear up the misunderstanding. Through the one-way mirror, Emma and Morrison watched as he fidgeted with his sleeves and kept glancing toward the door. Morrison entered the room alone, carrying a file and the evidence bag containing Lily's rabbit. She sat across from Torres and studied his face for a long moment before speaking. "David, I want to talk to you about this toy," she said, placing the evidence bag on the table between them. Torres barely glanced at it. "Like I told the officer, I found it on a bench. People leave stuff behind all the time. This isn't just any toy, David. This belonged to a 5-year-old girl named Lily Mason. She's been missing for 2 weeks." For just a moment, Torres's composed facade cracked. Emma saw it through the glass, a flash of something that looked like panic before he regained control. "I don't know anything about a missing kid," Torres said. "I pick up stuff sometimes, things people throw away. Maybe I was going to give it to charity or something." Morrison leaned forward. "The thing is, David, this rabbit was found at the scene of Lily's disappearance. It never made it to any bench in a park. So I'm wondering how it ended up in your bag." "I don't know," Torres insisted, but sweat was beading on his forehead. "Maybe someone else found it and left it on the bench. Maybe the cops dropped it. I don't know how these things work." Emma watched from behind the glass as Morrison continued the interrogation. Every question seemed to make Torres more nervous, more defensive. But it was what happened next that changed everything. A knock on the interview room door interrupted the questioning. Officer Jake Martinez poked his head in. "Detective, we need you outside for a minute. It's important." Morrison excused herself and joined Emma and Martinez in the hallway. Martinez looked pale, like he had just received terrible news. "What is it?" Morrison asked. "We ran Torres's information through the system," Martinez said. "His apartment address matches a location that came up in connection with another missing child case. 3 months ago in Millfield County, 8-year-old boy named Tommy Chen." Emma felt her stomach drop. "Another missing child?" "Gets worse," Martinez continued. "Torres's work schedule at the warehouse puts him off duty during the exact time frames when both children disappeared, and his route home from work takes him past both locations where the kids were last seen." Morrison was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then she looked back toward the interview room, where Torres sat alone, probably thinking he was in control of the situation. "We need to search his apartment," she said. "Now." Within 2 hours, a search warrant was approved and executed. Emma and Max joined the team that descended on Torres's apartment complex, a rundown building in a neighborhood where people minded their own business and didn't ask questions about strange noises or visitors at odd hours. Torres's apartment was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a dimly lit hallway that smelled of stale cigarettes and cooking grease. As they approached the door, Max became agitated again, his nose working overtime as he picked up scents that made him whine with anxiety. "He's detecting something," Emma told Morrison, "something he doesn't like." The apartment door opened to reveal a space that looked normal at first glance. A small living room with a worn couch and an old television. A tiny kitchen with dishes stacked in the sink. A bedroom with unmade sheets and clothes scattered on the floor. Nothing that would immediately raise suspicions. But Max went straight to the bedroom closet, scratching at the door and barking with an urgency that made Emma's heart race. Inside the closet, behind boxes of old clothes and forgotten belongings, officers found a loose floorboard. When they pried it up, Emma's worst fears were confirmed. Hidden beneath the floor was a small collection of children's belongings, a red baseball cap, a pair of tiny sneakers, a broken toy car, and most damning of all, a school backpack with the name Tommy Chen written in faded marker on the front pocket. "Jesus," one of the officers whispered, but Emma was focused on Max, who had moved to another part of the apartment and was now pawing at the bathroom floor near the bathtub. The tiles there looked different from the rest, slightly raised as if they had been recently disturbed and replaced. Morrison called for a specialized forensics team, one equipped to handle what might be underneath those tiles. As they waited, Emma knelt beside Max and tried to process what they had discovered. "How many?" she whispered to Morrison. "How many kids do you think he's taken?" "I don't know," Morrison replied grimly, "but we're going to find out." Back at the station, when confronted with the evidence found in his apartment, Torres finally broke, but not in the way anyone expected. "You don't understand," he said, his hands shaking as he looked at the photos of the items found beneath his floorboards. "I never hurt them. I would never hurt a child." "Then explain this," Morrison said, sliding the photo of Tommy Chen's backpack across the table. Torres was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "They weren't mine to keep," he said. I was just supposed to hold on to their things." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean, hold on to their things?" "There's someone else," Torres whispered. "Someone who pays people like me to collect things, to keep them safe until he needs them." Morrison leaned forward. "Who pays you, David?" "I can't tell you that," Torres said, looking genuinely terrified. "You don't know what he's capable of, what he'll do if he finds out I talked." "What he's capable of?" Morrison's voice was steel. "David, we found children's belongings hidden in your apartment, 2 children who are missing. What do you think we're capable of if you don't start talking?" Torres looked up at her with eyes full of fear and regret. "He calls himself Mr. Gray. I've never seen his face, never met him in person. Everything happens through messages, through dead drops. He pays well, and all I had to do was keep the items safe." "What items?" "Trophies," Torres said, and the word hung in the air like poison. "Things the children had with them when they were taken. He said they were important, that he needed them kept in a safe place until he could come back for them." Emma's blood turned to ice. Someone out there was collecting trophies from kidnapped children, and Torres was just a storage facility, a middleman in something much larger and more horrifying than they had imagined. "Where are the children now?" Morrison demanded. "I don't know," Torres said, and Emma believed him. "I never knew that part. I just kept the items safe, like I was told." Morrison stood up abruptly. "We need to contact the FBI. This is bigger than just one missing child." As the implications of Torres's confession sank in, Emma realized they had stumbled onto something that went far beyond a simple kidnapping. Somewhere out there, a man calling himself Mr. Gray was orchestrating the disappearance of children, and Torres was just one small piece of a much larger puzzle. But the most terrifying question remained unanswered. If Mr. Gray was collecting trophies from his victims, were the children still alive? What do you think Mr. Gray's true identity is, and how many more children might be involved in this horrifying network? The FBI arrived within hours, transforming the small police station into a hub of federal investigation. Agent Rebecca Foster, a specialist in child trafficking cases, took over the interrogation of Torres while Emma found herself thrust into the center of the biggest case of her career. But what happened next would test everything she thought she knew about police work. It was 3 a.m. when Emma's phone rang. She had been lying awake in bed, unable to sleep after the day's revelations. Max curled up on the floor beside her. The caller ID showed the police station, and Emma's heart immediately started racing. "Carter here," she answered. "Emma, we've got a problem," came Detective Morrison's urgent voice. "Torres is dead." Emma sat up straight, Max lifting his head at the sound of distress in her voice. "What? How?" "Apparent suicide in his cell, bedsheet around his neck. But here's the thing. The security camera in that section of the jail malfunctioned for exactly 27 minutes tonight. Same time frame when Torres died." Emma was already pulling on her clothes. "That's not a coincidence. No, it's not, and there's more. Before he died, Torres managed to scratch something into the paint on his cell wall. 2 words, Shadow knows. Emma's blood went cold. Shadow was Max's original name before she adopted him from the K9 training program. Very few people knew that detail, and Torres definitely shouldn't have been one of them. I'm coming in, Emma said. Bring Max, Morrison replied. I have a feeling we're going to need him. The police station buzzed with activity despite the late hour. FBI agents moved through the corridors like ghosts, examining evidence and conducting interviews. Agent Foster met Emma at the entrance, her expression grim. Officer Carter, I need to ask you some questions about your dog, Foster said. Torres's final message suggests Max might know something about this case that we don't. Emma felt defensive. Max is a police dog. He follows scents and alerts to threats. He doesn't know things in the way humans do. Maybe not, Foster agreed. But dogs have capabilities we don't fully understand. Sometimes they pick up on patterns, connections that escape human notice. Where did Max come from originally? The State K9 training facility, Emma replied. He was 3 years old when I got him, fully trained. And before that, Emma frowned. I assumed he was bred for police work, like most K9s. Why? Foster pulled out a file. We've been running background checks on everyone connected to this case. Max's microchip registration traces back to a breeder in Kentucky, but here's where it gets interesting. That breeder sold 6 puppies to a private buyer 5 years ago, a man who paid in cash and gave a false name. Emma's mouth went dry. You think Max was originally owned by someone involved in this? It's possible. Dogs remember more than we give them credit for. Scents, locations, people. They store that information for years. If Max was exposed to this trafficking network as a puppy, he might still recognize the smell of people involved. The implications hit Emma like a physical blow. Had Max recognized something about Torres that went deeper than criminal behavior? Had he been trying to tell them something that went beyond normal police dog training? There's more, Foster continued. We found Torres's phone hidden in his apartment. The messages are encrypted, but our tech team managed to decode some of them. He was supposed to make a delivery tonight. What kind of delivery? We don't know yet, but the location is interesting. An old subway maintenance tunnel that was closed down 15 years ago. The message said to bring the package to the usual place at midnight. Emma checked her watch. It was now past 4 a.m., so he missed the meeting. Which means Mr. Gray knows something went wrong. Torres was supposed to check in every few hours. When he didn't, someone decided he was too much of a liability. The reality of the situation settled over Emma like a heavy blanket. They weren't just dealing with a kidnapper anymore. They were up against an organization sophisticated enough to murder someone in a police cell and make it look like suicide. What's our next move? Emma asked. We're going to that tunnel, Foster said. Even though Torres missed his appointment, there might be evidence there, clues about where the children are being held. An hour later, Emma and Max found themselves part of a federal task force heading into the abandoned subway system beneath the city. The tunnels had been closed since a cave-in 15 years earlier, sealed off and forgotten by most people. But maps showed a complex network of maintenance passages that stretched for miles underground. Max became agitated the moment they descended into the tunnels. His nose worked constantly, and his body language told Emma he was picking up multiple scents that disturbed him. The air was stale and cold, filled with the smell of rust, dampness, and something else. Something that made Emma's skin crawl. He's picking up something, Emma whispered to Agent Foster as they made their way through the narrow passage, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The tunnel stretched ahead of them like the throat of some enormous beast, lined with corroded pipes and broken tiles that reflected their lights in eerie patterns. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, each drop echoing like a countdown timer. They had been walking for nearly 20 minutes when Max suddenly froze. His ears perked up, and he tilted his head as if listening to something the humans couldn't hear. Then, without warning, he bolted forward into the darkness. "Max, no!" Emma called, but the dog was already disappearing around a bend in the tunnel. The team hurried after him, their footsteps echoing off the walls. They found Max at a junction where the main tunnel split into 3 smaller passages. He was pawing at something on the ground, a piece of fabric caught on a broken pipe. Agent Foster knelt and examined it with her flashlight. "It's from a child's jacket, Pink fleece looks recent. Emma's heart pounded. Which way did they go? Max was already moving again, heading down the middle passage. This tunnel was narrower, and the smell that had been bothering Emma grew stronger. It was the scent of fear, of unwashed bodies, of places where terrible things had happened. They walked for another 10 minutes before the passage opened into a larger chamber. Their flashlights revealed what looked like an underground room that someone had been using recently. Blankets were spread on the floor, empty food containers sat in one corner, and a battery-powered lantern sat on an overturned crate. But it was what Max found next that made Emma's blood turn to ice. Hidden behind a loose brick in the wall was a small metal box. Inside were dozens of photographs, children of various ages, all looking scared and confused. Some of the photos had dates written on the back, going back several years. At the bottom of the box was a notebook filled with handwritten entries that made Emma feel sick. "These are records," Foster said, reading over Emma's shoulder. "Names, ages, pickup locations, delivery dates. This is a catalog of victims." Emma flipped through the pages with trembling hands. There were dozens of entries, maybe more than 100 children documented over the past 5 years. Some entries had red X marks next to them, and Emma didn't want to think about what that meant. "Look at this," Foster said, pointing to a recent entry. "Lily Mason, age 5, picked up October 15th, delivery scheduled for November 1st. That's tomorrow," Emma realized. Max had moved to another part of the chamber and was whining softly, pawing at what looked like a solid wall. When Foster shined her light on the spot, they could see that it wasn't actually solid. It was a hidden door, camouflaged to blend with the tunnel wall. "There's something behind there," Emma said. Foster signaled to the other agents, and they carefully opened the concealed door. Beyond it was a narrow staircase leading downward into complete darkness. The smell of fear and desperation grew stronger. As they descended the stairs, Emma could hear something that made her heart race, the faint sound of crying. A child's voice, weak and scared, echoing from somewhere in the darkness below. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to Foster. "I heard it." They reached the bottom of the stairs and found themselves in what could only be described as a prison. The chamber had been divided into small cells with makeshift bars. Most were empty, but in the far corner, a small figure huddled under a dirty blanket. "Lily," Emma called softly. The figure looked up, revealing the tear-stained face of a little girl with matted blonde hair and eyes that had seen too much. It was Lily Mason, alive but clearly traumatized by her 2 weeks in this underground hell. "I want to go home," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. Emma felt tears streaming down her face as she and Foster worked to open the improvised cell. Max pressed close to the bars, whining softly as if trying to comfort the frightened child. "You're safe now," Emma told Lily as she lifted her into her arms. "We're police officers. We're going to take you home to your mommy." But even as they prepared to evacuate Lily from the tunnels, Emma knew this was far from over. The notebook they had found contained references to multiple locations, other cells, other children who might still be trapped in similar underground prisons throughout the city. As they made their way back through the tunnels, Lily clinging to Emma like a lifeline, Max suddenly stopped again. His ears perked up, and he growled low in his throat, the same warning growl he had given when he first encountered Torres. "What is it, boy?" Emma asked. Then they heard it, footsteps echoing through the tunnels, coming from the direction they had entered. Someone else was down here, and from the way Max was reacting, it wasn't someone friendly. Agent Foster raised her weapon and signaled for silence. The footsteps were getting closer, accompanied by the sound of multiple voices speaking in hushed tones. Emma held Lily closer and tried to think. They were trapped in an underground maze with a traumatized child, being hunted by people who had already proven they were willing to kill to protect their operation. In her arms, Lily whispered something that made Emma's blood freeze. "He's coming back! The Gray Man always comes back! Who is the mysterious Gray Man? And will Emma and Max be able to protect Lily from whatever's coming through those dark tunnels?" Agent Foster motioned for everyone to move deeper into the chamber, away from the entrance. The footsteps were getting closer, and Emma could now make out at least 3 different voices echoing through the stone corridors. One of them spoke with an authority that made her skin crawl. Calm, measured, like someone discussing the weather rather than hunting down people in underground tunnels. "They found the girl," the voice said. That means they found everything else too. Emma pressed herself against the cold wall, holding Lily as tightly as she dared without frightening the child further. Max positioned himself between them and the entrance, his body coiled like a spring, ready to unleash violence if necessary. "Sir, what do you want us to do?" came another voice, younger and nervous. "Clean it up," the first voice replied. "All of it. No witnesses, no evidence, no loose ends. The operation moves to Site 7 immediately." Agent Foster caught Emma's eye and pointed toward a narrow passage at the far end of the chamber, their only way out that didn't involve confronting whoever was coming down those stairs. Emma nodded and began moving toward it, but Lily chose that moment to whimper softly. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. "Did you hear that?" came the nervous voice from the stairwell. "Check every corner," the authoritative voice commanded. "If they're down here, find them." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as she crept toward the escape passage. The opening was barely wide enough for an adult, and she wasn't sure how they would get through it quickly while carrying Lily. But as they reached the entrance, Max suddenly bolted back toward the main chamber. "Max, no!" Emma whispered desperately, but the dog was already gone. What happened next would haunt Emma's dreams for years to come. The sound of Max's attack echoed through the tunnels, snarling, shouting, the crash of bodies hitting stone walls. Then came the gunshots, 3 of them in rapid succession, followed by an ominous silence. Emma bit her lips so hard she tasted blood, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to go back and help her partner. But she had Lily to protect, and Agent Foster was pulling her toward the narrow passage. "We have to go," Foster whispered urgently. "Now." They squeezed through the tight opening, Emma going first with Lily, then Foster and the other agents. The passage was cramped and dark, forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees while following the beam of a single flashlight. Behind them, they could hear voices again, angry now, frustrated. "The dog got Mitchell," someone was saying. "Tore his throat open before we could stop it." "Where's the animal now?" came the calm voice. "Dead, but there's blood leading toward that crack in the wall. They went through there." Emma's chest tightened. Max was dead, and it was her fault. She had let him run back to protect them, and now her partner, her friend, was gone. But she couldn't grieve yet. Not while Lily needed her. The passage seemed to go on forever, winding through the bowels of the city like the digestive tract of some enormous beast. Emma's knees were scraped raw from crawling over rough stone, and her shoulders ached from the cramped position, but she kept moving. Behind them, she could hear the sounds of pursuit, voices echoing through the larger tunnels, flashlight beams probing the darkness. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, they emerged from the passage into a storm drain that connected to the city's sewer system. The smell was overwhelming, but Emma had never been so happy to breathe foul air in her life. "The storm drain connects to River Street," Agent Foster said, consulting a map on her phone. "We can surface through a maintenance access about half a mile from here." They waded through ankle-deep water, following the curve of the drain toward the surface. Lily had stopped crying, but remained silent, clinging to Emma with a grip that spoke of absolute terror. Every few minutes, Emma thought she heard sounds of pursuit echoing through the tunnels behind them, but it might have been her imagination. When they finally climbed out through a maintenance hatch into the pre-dawn darkness of River Street, Emma felt like she had been reborn. The cool October air had never felt so sweet, and even the distant sound of traffic seemed like a symphony after the claustrophobic silence of the underground. But their ordeal was far from over. Agent Foster immediately called for backup and medical assistance, but as they waited for the ambulance and additional FBI units to arrive, she shared information that made Emma's blood run cold. "While we were underground, my team decoded more of Torres's communications," Foster said. "The operation we stumbled into tonight was just one small part of something much bigger. They've been moving children through this network for years, and they have locations in at least 6 different cities." Emma looked down at Lily, who had finally fallen asleep in her arms, exhausted from trauma and terror. "How many children are still out there?" "Based on what we found in that notebook, at least 30 are currently missing, and those are just the recent cases." The ambulance arrived and paramedics began examining Lily, who woke up screaming when strangers tried to touch her. She would only calm down when Emma held her hand, refusing to let anyone else near her. She's been through severe trauma, the lead paramedic told Emma. Dehydration, malnutrition, signs of psychological abuse. She's going to need extensive therapy, and it's going to be a long recovery. Emma nodded, watching as they carefully loaded Lily into the ambulance. I want to ride with her to the hospital. I'm afraid that's not possible right now, Agent Foster said gently. We need you to come back to the station for debriefing. And Emma, there's something else. Emma turned, dreading whatever additional horror Foster was about to reveal. We found Max's body in the tunnel, Foster said softly. But there's something you need to know. When our forensics team examined him, they found something embedded in his collar. Something that wasn't part of his standard police equipment. Foster held up a small electronic device, no bigger than a button. It's a tracking device, professional grade, military specifications. Someone has been monitoring Max's location for months, maybe years. Emma stared at the device, her mind racing. You think that's how they knew where to find us? It's possible, but here's what's really interesting. This device wasn't just tracking Max's location. It was also recording audio. Everything Max heard, everything said around him, was being transmitted to someone. The implications hit Emma like a sledgehammer. Her partner hadn't just been a police dog. He had been an unwitting spy, feeding information about police operations directly to the people they were trying to catch. How long has this been going on? Emma asked. We're not sure yet. The device has a manufacturing date from 2 years ago, which means it was placed after Max joined the police force. Someone with access to police facilities, someone Max trusted, put this on him. Emma felt sick. Not only had she lost her partner, but now she discovered that Max had been unknowingly betraying them all along. The very dog she trusted with her life had been feeding their every move to the enemy. There's more, Foster continued. The audio files recovered from the device include conversations from your apartment, your car, everywhere Max went with you. Someone has been listening to your private life for 2 years. Emma's legs felt weak. Everything she had said, every case she had worked, every private moment in her home, all of it had been monitored by people who were willing to kill children. But then another thought struck her, one that made her feel even worse. The attack on Torres, she said slowly. Max's reaction wasn't just police training, was it? Foster shook her head grimly. We think Max recognized Torres' scent from his original training before he became a police dog. The trafficking ring probably used Max as a puppy to track scents, to find children who tried to run away. When he attacked Torres, he wasn't acting on police training. He was remembering something from his past that terrified him. Emma closed her eyes, trying to process the horror of it all. Max hadn't been protecting her from Torres. He had been trying to protect Torres from the memories of what they had both been part of years earlier. So, everything we thought we knew about Max was wrong, Emma said. Not everything, Foster replied. Max chose to protect you and Lily tonight. He could have run when the shooting started, but he stayed and fought to give you time to escape. Whatever they did to him as a puppy, whatever programming they tried to install, his loyalty to you was stronger. The words provided little comfort. Max was still dead, and Emma was still alone. 3 hours later, Emma sat in the hospital waiting room as doctors examined Lily. She had given her statement to the FBI, turned over all evidence from the case, and answered what felt like 1,000 questions about Max's behavior over the past 3 years. Now, she just felt empty. Mrs. Mason arrived at the hospital just as the sun was rising, her face a mixture of joy and terror as she ran toward the emergency room. Emma watched through the window as mother and daughter were reunited, Lily finally breaking down in tears as she clung to the woman who had never stopped looking for her. She's going to be okay, Agent Foster said, sitting down beside Emma. It'll take time, but she's strong, and she's got a mother who loves her. Emma nodded but didn't trust herself to speak. She kept thinking about Max, about the way he had looked at her one last time before running back to fight people who had once owned him. We've made arrests at 6 different locations based on the information from that notebook, Foster continued. 17 children have been recovered alive, and we've dismantled what appears to be the largest child trafficking network on the East Coast. And the man with the calm voice, Mr. Gray, Foster's expression darkened. Still out there. But we'll get him. This network was his life's work, and we just destroyed it. He's going to make mistakes now, and when he does, we'll be ready. Emma stood up, her body aching from the night's ordeal. "I need to go home." "Emma," Foster called as she headed toward the exit. "Max saved a lot of lives tonight. Not just Lily's, but all those other children we found. Whatever else he was, whatever they made him do before you knew him, he died a hero." Emma paused at the doorway, but didn't turn around. "I know," she said quietly. "I just wish I could tell him that." As she walked out into the morning sunlight, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Mr. Gray was still out there, and he would be angry about losing his operation. Men like that didn't just disappear. They adapted, evolved, found new ways to hurt people. But for now, Lily Mason was going home with her mother, 17 other children were safe, and a monster's network had been exposed to the light. It would have to be enough. What kind of person do you think could build such an elaborate trafficking network? And how do you think Emma will cope with losing Max while knowing he was being used against her? 3 months had passed since that terrible night in the tunnels, but Emma still woke up most mornings expecting to hear Max's breathing from the floor beside her bed. The empty space where his food bowl used to sit felt like an open wound that refused to heal. She had been offered another K9 partner twice, but each time she declined. The thought of replacing Max felt like betrayal, even though she knew he would want her to continue protecting people. The department had given her a commendation for her role in dismantling the trafficking network. 17 children had been reunited with their families, and the FBI continued to arrest people connected to the operation across 6 states. But Emma took no satisfaction in the recognition. Every night she lay awake wondering if she could have done something different, some way to save Max while still rescuing those children. The knock on her apartment door came on a rainy Thursday evening in February. Emma opened it to find Agent Foster standing in the hallway, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a small figure that made Emma's heart skip. Lily Mason, now 6 years old, holding her mother's hand and looking nervous but determined. "I'm sorry to bother you at home," Mrs. Mason said, "but Lily insisted we come. She's been having nightmares again, and the only thing that calms her down is talking about Max." Emma knelt to Lily's eye level. The little girl had gained weight and looked healthier, but there was still a wariness in her eyes that spoke of trauma that would take years to fully heal. "Hi, Lily," Emma said softly. "How are you feeling?" "I miss the dog," Lily said simply. "He was brave like a superhero." Emma felt tears threatening. "He was very brave. He saved us all." "Mommy says he went to heaven," Lily continued, "but I think maybe he's still watching over me. Sometimes I hear barking in my dreams, but it's not scary barking. It's like he's telling me I'm safe." Mrs. Mason spoke up. "The therapist says it's part of her healing process, creating positive associations with the trauma. But she keeps asking about getting a dog of her own. The problem is, every time we visit animal shelters, she gets overwhelmed and starts crying. She says none of them are right," Agent Foster added, "that they don't feel like Max." Emma looked at Lily, understanding something that the adults were missing. "What kind of dog are you looking for, sweetie?" "One that's brave but gentle," Lily said. "One that knows how to find lost things. One that can protect other kids like Max protected me." That's when it hit Emma. Lily didn't just want a pet. She wanted a partner, a way to turn her trauma into something that could help other people. "What if I told you there might be a way for you to work with dogs when you get older?" Emma asked. "Dogs that help police officers find missing children, just like Max did?" Lily's eyes lit up for the first time since Emma had known her. "Really? I could help save other kids? Maybe someday when you're grown up and ready. But first, you need to learn how to take care of dogs, how to train them, how to be their partner." Mrs. Mason looked uncertain. "Emma, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but Lily is only 6. She's been through so much already." Emma stood up and looked at both women. "I'm not suggesting anything dangerous, but Lily has been through something that most people never experience. She understands what it feels like to be lost and scared. That experience, as terrible as it was, could be turned into something powerful, a way to help other children who are going through the same thing." Over the next hour, they talked about possibilities. Emma had been thinking about leaving active duty police work anyway. The weight of Max's death and the knowledge that their every move had been monitored for years had left her questioning whether she could trust anyone in the department. But what if she could channel her experience into something different? "There's a program," Emma said, pulling up information on her laptop. "It's called K9 Heroes. They train therapy dogs to work with trauma victims. and they also have an educational component that teaches kids about dog safety and how police dogs work. It's not dangerous, but it gives children a way to process their experiences through positive interaction with animals. Lily pressed close to the computer screen, studying the photos of children working with gentle, well-trained dogs. "Could I really do this?" "Not tomorrow," Emma said with a smile, "but maybe in a few years when you're ready, and maybe I could help teach you." That conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter in all their lives. Emma submitted her resignation from active police duty and enrolled in a program to become a certified therapy dog trainer. It would take 2 years of education and certification, but for the first time since Max's death, she felt like she had a purpose again. Mrs. Mason, meanwhile, had been struggling with her own trauma. The knowledge that her daughter had been held in underground tunnels for 2 weeks, that she had almost lost Lily forever, left her with anxiety that made it difficult to let her daughter out of sight. The idea of Lily having a positive goal, something to work toward that would turn her experience into strength rather than weakness, appealed to her. "I want to help too," Mrs. Mason said during one of their regular meetings at Emma's apartment. "I don't know how, but I want to be part of this." Emma had an idea. "What if we started a support group? Other families who have been through similar situations, kids who have been rescued from trafficking, parents who know what it's like to have a child go missing. We could meet here, maybe bring in some therapy dogs, let people share their experiences." The first meeting was held in Emma's living room 6 weeks later. Only 3 families showed up: Mrs. Mason and Lily, another mother whose son had been found after being missing for a month, and a father whose daughter had escaped from a trafficking situation in another state. They sat in a circle on Emma's floor, sharing stories and tears, while a borrowed therapy dog named Bella moved between them, offering comfort with her calm presence. But it was during the second meeting that something extraordinary happened. Lily was sitting with Bella, gently brushing the dog's fur while talking about her nightmares, when Bella suddenly became alert. The dog's ears perked up, and she moved toward Emma's front window, whining softly. Emma recognized the behavior immediately. It was exactly how Max used to act when he detected something that concerned him. "What is it, girl?" Emma asked, moving toward the window. Outside, she saw a man standing across the street, partially hidden behind a parked car. He was watching her apartment building, with an intensity that made Emma's skin crawl. Middle-aged gray hair, wearing a long coat despite the warm weather. "Everyone stay away from the windows," Emma said quietly, reaching for her phone to call Agent Foster. But the man must have realized he had been spotted. He turned and walked quickly down the street, disappearing around a corner before Emma could get a clear look at his face. "Who was that?" Mrs. Mason asked. "I don't know," Emma replied, but her instincts were screaming that this was no coincidence. Someone had been watching her apartment, watching the support group meetings. Someone who knew about her connection to the trafficking case. Agent Foster arrived within 30 minutes, bringing 2 other FBI agents with her. They searched the area, but found no trace of the man Emma had seen. "It might have been nothing," Foster said, but her expression was grim. "Or it might have been Mr. Gray. We've had reports of someone matching his description in 3 different cities over the past month. He seems to be tracking down people connected to the case." Emma felt a chill. What does he want? Revenge, most likely. We destroyed his network, cost him years of work and millions of dollars. Men like that don't just disappear. They rebuild and they settle scores. The next few days passed without incident, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She found herself checking locks twice, looking over her shoulder when she walked to her car, jumping at unexpected sounds. The safe space she had been trying to build for trauma victims was starting to feel like a trap. It was Lily who came up with the solution. "What if we got our own dog?" she suggested during their next meeting. "Not just a therapy dog that visits sometimes, but one that lives here and can protect us." Emma had been avoiding the idea of getting another dog since Max's death, but Lily's words made sense. They needed protection, and they needed healing. Maybe they could find both in the same place. The search took weeks, but they eventually found him at a rescue shelter an hour outside the city. A 2-year-old German Shepherd mix named Scout, who had been surrendered by owners who couldn't handle his energy. He was intelligent, protective, and gentle with children, exactly what they needed. But Scout was more than just a pet or even a therapy dog. Within days of bringing him home, Emma realized that he had many of the same instincts that had made Max such an exceptional police dog. Scout could sense when people were lying, could detect emotional distress from across a room, and showed an uncanny ability to alert to dangers that humans missed. "He's special," Lily observed one day while teaching Scout to sit and stay. Like Max was special. Emma nodded, watching Scout work with the little girl who had survived so much trauma. "Yes, he is." 2 months after Scout joined their extended family, Emma woke up in the middle of the night to find him standing by her bedroom door, growling low in his throat. Every muscle in his body was tense, and his attention was focused on something outside the apartment. Emma grabbed her phone and crept toward the living room window. In the street below, she could see a figure moving between parked cars, trying to stay hidden while watching her building. It was the same man she had seen months earlier, gray hair, long coat, moving with the careful precision of someone who had done this many times before. But this time, Emma was ready. She called Agent Foster while keeping watch on the street. "He's back," she whispered into the phone. "And this time, I'm not letting him get away." 20 minutes later, FBI agents surrounded the building while Emma watched from her window. The man tried to run when he realized he had been spotted, but there was nowhere to go. Agent Foster's team had covered every exit. When they brought him up to Emma's apartment for identification, she found herself face to face with the monster who had orchestrated the trafficking of dozens of children. Mr. Gray was smaller than she had expected, unremarkable in appearance, the kind of person you would pass on the street without a second glance. But his eyes held a coldness that made Emma understand how he had been able to do such terrible things to innocent children. "You destroyed everything," he said, staring at Emma with undisguised hatred. "Years of work, millions in revenue. Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" Emma looked back at him steadily. "I know exactly what we cost you. We cost you the lives of innocent children. We cost you the ability to hurt people, and I would do it again in a heartbeat." Mr. Gray smiled, and the expression was more terrifying than his anger had been. "This isn't over. There are others like me, other networks. You saved a few children, but you didn't save them all. You'll never save them all." Scout growled from beside Emma, sensing the man's malevolence. Lily, who had been hiding in Emma's bedroom, peeked around the corner and looked at the man who had been responsible for her weeks of captivity and terror. "You're wrong," Lily said in a clear, steady voice that surprised everyone in the room. "We're going to save all of them, Emma and Scout and me. We're going to find every lost kid and bring them home." Mr. Gray's smile faded as he looked at the determined 6-year-old who had survived his network and emerged stronger. For the first time since Emma had met him, the man looked uncertain. As Agent Foster led him away in handcuffs, Emma realized that Lily was right. This was their mission now, not just to heal from their trauma, but to transform it into something that could protect other children. What started as tragedy had become purpose. What began with loss had grown into hope. And somewhere, Emma liked to think, Max was watching over them all, proud that his sacrifice had led to something beautiful. Do you believe one person's trauma can truly be transformed into a force that saves others? And what would you have said to Mr. Gray in that moment? If you found this story powerful, share, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in humanity.